Hey, welcome back everyone to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 192, Black Cultural Intelligence Talk. I'm here, my co-facilitator.
What's going on, Mike?
Good brother yourself.
Good, good.
Good. All right, so tonight's topic is basically developing strategic alliances and culture of resilience. So I attended I attend events outside of the Black Brain Trust, offline, and engage with a lot of people from the diaspora, the continent, and other places. So I've been wanting to do this for quite some time, but we haven't really had a whole lot of time to do it. Uh, we have so many other things on the agenda and so many dockets that need to be created. I had to push this back, several months. So here we are.
Hmm.
You have something to say?
Oh
My
no, I'm
fault.
sorry. No, go ahead, man.
Hmm. All right. All right. So basically, let me share my screen real quick. All right. So what is cultural intelligence? Um, Cultural intelligence, or CQ, which is the third leg of the intelligence quotient, is basically cultural quotient. Measures your capability to relate and work effectively in culturally diverse situations. It's a form of intelligence that has been tested by academic researchers in over G8, in over 98 countries for nearly 2 decades. So basically, how how you interact with other people is going to determine how far you're going to go in this sort of political climate that's happening right now. The globalization, fourth industrial revolution, um, the tectonic shift in cryptocurrencies and uh, fintech markets, so financial technology markets. All of these things come into play, and why cultural intelligence matters when you're going forward beyond 2020. Although it's been around the last 20 or 30 years, it's only recently in the last maybe 2 to 3 years that it's really mattered. So
Hmm.
where do Black people see themselves from a cultural intelligence standpoint when dealing with other groups of people, including those from the diaspora?
Right. You know, this it's really good you bring this up, man. Because and you all pardon me, man. I still got these allergy things going on here,
Hmm.
but I'm big on pushing for us to be global minded. You know, especially as it relates to this fourth industrial push that's going on. Because so much of what you just mentioned, there's a convergence of all these things: cryptocurrencies, globalized markets, new forms, new ways of trading. All of these things are making us more connected. Uh, even on down to, when you contact someone for customer service, for example, you have to
Hmm.
call the line to troubleshoot. You more than likely you're not talking to someone in this country. You know, so it's the realization that we're more connected to the globe than we think, and because of this, we have to use this as a at least you have to use this as a as an intelligence gathering mechanism. Like you have the intelligence to know how to deal with the rest of the world.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. So what is why cultural intelligence? So why cultural intelligence predicts readiness for working and relating effectively with people from different cultural backgrounds. The higher your cultural intelligence, the more likely you will gain new opportunities, earn higher wages, and experience success working in today's diverse, globalized world. That's what Complex was just referring to, and that's what we're trying to really bring to light tonight. We talk a lot about technology, space and technology. We do that on Mondays, but a lot of the fourth industrialization, what some of the features that are coming out of that, the digital portion, and as well as the civilian aspect of it, manufacturing processes and things of that nature. How do Black people really see themselves in interacting with these other cultural bodies? I mean, yeah, you have Black Americans, but then what happens when you start interacting with Black Africans? Well, guess what? That hashtag that Black Americans love so much is going to be null and void when you start dealing outside of the those immediate circles, especially those limited circles. Many Africans, Africa has well over 100 different languages and dialects in different regions where melanated people actually are from. So you have to be able to interact and interoperate with those different groups of people. And what we try to do on the Brain Trust, if you really look at the intellectual cooperative piece, the co-op piece of the Black Brain Trust, is that we have several members who speak several different languages and come from several different places. So one of the reasons why it functions so well is because we have cultural intelligence here. We have the ability to interact and to deal with each other on a multifaceted level.
That's correct, Mike. And one person I want to quickly shout out is Scholar Chang. We affectionately refer to him as our Chinese delegate. But he is also someone who I would say he has a global understanding, and so
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of cultural synergies that he sees and has with large parts of American culture. And so in our discussions with him, man, we've learned from him that there's a lot of similarities. And so again, when you have these types of very deep discussions with really trying to learn about other places and cultures and stuff, you'll find that at the end of the day, we are essentially all humans, and we just have different stories to tell, but similar paths and experiences.
Right. But when you really take in culture, culture is the mechanism on how humans interact with the environment, right? So, I mean, everybody has their own culture. Uh, and when you think about Black people have a very unique culture in regards to in regards to America. So it's something to take note of when you are a Black American, when you are hashtag ADOS, whatever label you want to put on yourself. How do you interact with the rest of the world? How do you interact with melanated Venezuelans, or how do you interact with melanated Brazilians? Afro Brazilians, what they call them. Same thing in London, just across the pond, right? We have melanated people over there in the United Kingdom, but how do you interact with them if you keep shutting them down with a hashtag? That's defeating your whole entire defeating the strategy of cultural intelligence. So those type of things have to be taken into consideration when you're actually making moves. You can't just shut down just because uh, you have a hashtag in front of you. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think cultural intelligence is probably going to be a theme going forward. You know, something for us to start to adopt and start to develop within ourselves, more of a global cultural intelligence.
Hmm. All right, let me share my screen and show another piece. Hey, peace to everyone in the chat. I haven't been able to just look at the chat for a second. Adrian Thomas, Just Be You TV, how are you doing? My Isis Coda, what's going on? Rosie Rays, welcome. Q497, welcome. Greg, welcome. So we got 20 people watching, 15 likes. Just please hit the like button. All right, this is just a topology for cultural intelligence. So the first part is actually drive. How can I adapt, right? The intrinsic and extrinsic portions of it, motivation and confidence. So drive is what moves you, what's going to guide you, and then it shifts over into knowledge. How is this similar to my other experiences? Cognition, understanding values and norms, leadership, and then it shifts over into strategy, which is how can I plan, awareness, um, metacognition, planning and checking, and then it shifts over into action, which is how do I behave, speech, acts, verbal, nonverbal behaviors, cues, and things of that nature. Um, this is basically the core functions of cultural intelligence and how you move around. Now, the other piece to cultural intelligence is, the IQ, which is intelligence, and then it's EQ, which is emotional, and then the third leg of it is cultural. So IQ, EQ, CQ is how it works.
Right.
Hey, what's going on, C Boogie Productions?
Right. So I'm trying to see where.
Your mic is very low, Complex.
Okay, hold on. Let me. Okay. Can you? How do I sound? Do I sound okay?
You're gonna need a lot more volume than that.
Oh shit. Hold on. Okay. How about now?
A lot more volume than that.
Okay. Good now.
No, try logging off and logging back on.
All right.
Yeah. So what I was saying before was that there's something called, according to this chart, it's called drive, or the topology is called drive, right? How can I adapt? What are my interests, intrinsic and extrinsic, and motivation and confidence, right? Um, you're going to need a lot of that in order to do business. It's impossible for you not to have drive, right? So that's what moves you. Then you take into consideration knowledge. So knowledge is how is this similar to my other experiences? So you're referring back to um, previous experiences as a knowledge base to how you're going to interact with uh, this external area, right? Other cultures in terms of just the globalization aspect. Let's take, for example, Black people's struggle in America is very similar to that of Palestinians in Palestine and with their occupation of dealing with the Zionists. So Zionist occupation is basically white supremacy in Palestine in the occupied territories, in the same way that white nationalism, far right extremists in America uh, basically do the same exact thing to black and brown people. So that's the sort of knowledge referral.
Okay. Do I sound okay, Mike?
I can hear you, but I don't know if anybody in the chat could actually hear you. It's really low.
I don't know how. Why the hell I'm having this problem? All right, give me a second.
Yep. And then we're going to look at strategy. As strategy comes after knowledge. How can I plan? Awareness, planning, checking. Uh, so, in your ability to be strategic, are you doing checks and balances? Do you have a docket like we have in the chat, or beneath the video? Do you have um, heightened awareness? Are you being cognizant of these other areas of concern that may be happening to other people around the continent? In Venezuela, we talk about Venezuela a lot because the victims are the actual melanated people who were never represented before. So the same struggles same civil rights struggles uh, that black people in America had, they're having the same issue down in Venezuela. At least they did until Chavez came along, and then they started identifying them as Africans and put them into made them a part of the Constitution, gave them constitutional rights, much like in the United States, black people got constitutional rights. So we see a lot of similarities in strategy, knowledge, and and drive, right? So how can I plan the awareness, the cogniz the cognizing, planning, and checking? So, and then when you step away from that, you go into action. So how do I behave? Speech, acts, verbal, nonverbal behaviors, cues, and things of that nature. Well, how am I interacting with my other, partners, business partners, friends, uh, colleagues, and things of that nature? How am I interacting with them? Well, if I'm interacting with them from from an apprehensive standpoint, then what's going to happen here is that there will be no way to build any sort of actions that's going to lead to a more fruitful ending, right? More fruitful end result. So if you want to be a part of the fourth industrial revolution, you have to accept globalization.
Yeah, you can't be apprehensive about learning about other people. Do I do
Mhm.
I sound okay, Mike?
You have a little bit of feedback, but you sound better now.
Okay. Dude, I don't know what the hell.
Hmm.
I'm waiting for letting my
Hmm.
Bluetooth charge up. So shit.
Okay.
Yeah. But no no no. Yeah, if you view like other people with apprehension, then you can't acquire data or you can't acquire intelligence from them because you don't speak with them. You don't interact with them with with like inquisitiveness. You know what I mean? Like you don't
Hmm.
speak with them like from the position of like, I've watched a few documentaries about these regions in your country. So, and then you have like questions to ask them, right? And then what'll happen is that you got one bit of information from say like the documentary that you referencing in conversation with this person, but then they tell you like a whole other side of the story, and then that gives you like a whole sort of jump off point to do further research. And this is what I'm talking about is like as far as like acquiring intelligence, right? And data mining people basically.
Hmm. Yeah, that's actually a good point about data mining. You're basically doing self data mining as you go out and you explore in your travels. Um, we have Nagon 11, a part of the Black Brain Trust, Kasiklier. He's actually a very traveled brother, so he has a lot of experience in dealing with other different cultures. I would say he's, you know, probably the king of cultural intelligence on the Black Brain Trust. He's very well versed in these areas. Speaks
I would
several different languages. Uh,
I would definitely give Paul a shout out in that regard as well.
yeah, I was going to get to Paul. I just
Oh,
wanted
okay.
to go into Nagon's background first. Um, speaks several different languages. Traveled immensely. Has been a part of fraternity. Or I should say, he pledged. He's highly, college educated. A dad and grandfather. And he did so many areas of cultural intelligence for just this one person alone. It's mind-boggling that we don't value this, right? We don't value that aspect. Um, but then we have guys, other brothers like Paul Bryant, who's a part of the Black Brain Trust as well, who also speaks a couple different languages, um, well traveled, comes from a Caribbean background. All of these things matter when you're talking about cultural intelligence. And when you have something like the Black Brain Trust, you have several members who speak Creole, speak French, speak Spanish, speaks Mandarin, and maybe Cantonese, uh, other languages such as Swahili.
Yeah, Somali.
This is various amount, right? You're talking about a various amount of intelligence happening right on our platform, the Black Brain Trust. So when we talk about being, Manosphere 3.0, that's exactly what we're talking about. We're not talking about, just separating ourselves from different people. It has a lot to do with cultural intelligence, and that's why I wanted to start having these conversations, because cultural intelligence matters in the fourth industrial revolution as well as globalization.
I couldn't even view it as separating ourselves. When you really think about it, it's actually the opposite.
Hmm.
You know, that's what it is. It's seeing and interacting with more of the world,
Hmm.
not less of it.
Right, right. And you, I mean, I would like to share the chart again, but I'll just go into number two. Number two is strategic alliances, developing strategic alliances, right? Are we building networks outside of our immediate circles, right? So, who do we know outside of this country? Who can we pick up the phone and call? Or who can we actually text or send a message through social media and actually get some actionable results um, through our intelligence, right? Because intelligence is basically this actionable data. Um, you can you data mine? Can you actually link up with other people across the water or outside of your immediate circles? That plays a role in terms of how you interact on the global scale.
Yeah, and then and it's also um, and then I would say another component to that too is can that be converted to some sort of business action? Because we do may have like strategic, we're not even so much strategic. So let's say, for example, you're on Instagram, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll take my Instagram, for example. I'm not really all that active on it. I can only do like one social media platform at a time. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
kind of weaning off Facebook, but we'll see where it goes next. But
Mm-hmm.
I have there's a lot of like professional drivers, European drivers, GT drivers. A lot of these dudes, like I'm, I'm, I'm I don't know what you call it, friends, or I'm a subscriber, I follow or whatever. And oddly enough, man, because I've done like a few things, like snap a screenshot of a TCR race on my computer, when I had my shop, right? And I just tagged, TCR and all that stuff, and I just said something simple like, "Yep, getting my day started," and I had like a race up, and then so I got all these dudes started following me. And then when I started posting like, cart stuff from the track and stuff, then these dudes would hit me like, "Hey man, look, if I'm in the States, can I come out with you?" And that supported that would actually support a business that I actually had going on. So something like kind of taking something, I guess we largely view as benign, or we use it for more of like personal consumption reasons, right? But again, we're talking about data mining, right? The intelligence to use, a tech, the intelligence to be able to, again, take something as benign as an international connection through something like Instagram, and then turn it
Mm-hmm.
into, like you said, an actionable, an actionable item or something, or biz, you know, adds to your conversion rate, you know, in your business
Mhm.
ROI or something, you know. But
Mhm.
that's essentially what that's referencing.
Yeah, absolutely. And social media allows that sort of interaction that would never ever happen. Maybe 15 years ago. Uh, you can go back
Right.
to the first iPod. That was not really happening on that level. I mean, yeah, you had AOL Instant Messenger and Yahoo Messenger, but you didn't have the level of depth that social media today provides that those other messaging platforms did not provide before. You still needed a phone back then. You still needed some form of touch tone phone to actually interact. Now that social media has taken place and has been largely the mass communicator or mass platform for communication, it's allowing this cultural intelligence to be at the tip of your fingers, basically.
And I mean, and these platforms even provide you, like, they provide you with the analytics too.
Yeah.
You know,
Hmm.
they give you the analytics.
Yeah.
Uh, they geotag where stuff's coming from, the duration. You know, you start to kind of, you can get a feel and a pulse of like, okay, yeah, a lot of people check me out, but this one particular place is checking me out. Why is that?
Hmm.
You know, you could dig further into that. I mean, that's what we're talking about. Like, you know,
Hmm.
um, what it is that you what intelligence, how, okay, how is your engagement in these things making you smarter?
Hmm. Well, you're using it now. The data mining portion, it makes you smarter just based off of the readily available information, right? So before I didn't know how to speak Spanish, but now I can say hello in Spanish. I can say how are you doing? ¿Cómo está? And then reply back with bien.
Bien,
So I can
bien.
reply back with bien as well,
Gracias,
right?
chico.
So
Yeah.
now, right. So now I'm building up my intelligence just based off of that, just based off the interaction alone. Um, I have female colleagues from Singapore, uh, China, Vietnam, India. All have said if you want to come through when you touch down, let me know. Right. So now I have these connections. I have all of these contacts, and I can leverage it to my advantage because of the cultural intelligence aspect of interacting with people on a global scale.
Right.
These are people I know in person, but they also have their contacts, right? They have their contacts who have other contacts that allow 6 degrees of separation to actually come to formation.
Yeah, you know, that's a concept that I used to being too heavy some time ago because of, like, you know, just dealings in the music industry when I was doing back in the day. It was amazed at, like, just who you'd be connected to just by knowing one person.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. And can I get anything out of this, right? So if push comes to shove and economy collapses in the United States, or if we perceive a collapse, can I leverage my contacts with the cultural intelligence that I have to make a move? Can
Or
I go to India? Yes I can because my colleagues have already given me the green light to come through. Same thing in
yeah.
Vietnam. Same thing in Singapore.
Or, how do I use my cultural intelligence now to hedge against that,
Hmm.
right? To enrich yourself now. I mean, like, again, something as simple as like Instagram. Everybody uses it, but I was amazed, man. I was amazed at how many dudes hit me, and these are like top level drivers, man. And they were like, "You do two stroke?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do two stroke carts." Man, well, look, if I ever come to Southern California, they got my info.
Hmm.
There's a lot of like drivers with my phone number. It's like, dude, that's crazy.
Hmm. Yeah, and it goes back to the monetization piece, right? So
Right.
now, based on what I know, I can actually be a cultural consultant to
Mm-hmm.
others or others around this globalization platform and
Yeah.
globalization markets and opportunities. So now I can actually charge for my services, or I can leverage my cultural intelligence to get me into different opportunities and different doors that I would have never have had had I isolated myself behind a hashtag.
Yeah. Look, so remember some time back, we profiled this kid that I was supporting when I had my shop. His name is Christian Daniel Jr. He's a mini MotoGP racer, and he's a little young little black kid from SoCal, and he's in Spain right now racing.
Hmm.
But it was that same thing, man. Like it was eyes getting on him, right, through like an
Hmm.
Instagram or something, or like a YouTube video or something where this dude was just shredding, and he got offered a seat at an invitational. So his pops got the money together. They flew over there, and they damn near won the thing. The next thing you know, there was a team that was just like, look, okay, if you guys can figure out a way to move here, we got a seat for them.
Hmm.
They moved. They packed up and moved. So just like that. I mean, there you go. International engagement. Something as simple as a YouTube video being shown led to a career for this young kid.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Well, I'm thinking about this from a group perspective now, right? So I'm thinking about how do Black people collectively leverage cultural intelligence to their advantage. If you have never left your hood or your zip code, you are culturally unintelligent at this point. You lack the intelligence to actually have upward mobility, because a lot of these opportunities, especially in the information technology industry, it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. And the cultural intelligence aspect is going to give you some form of leverage in that area of your contacts. And if you don't have those sort of contacts because you isolated yourself from so many other cultures, you have basically screwed yourself.
I could see it working in such a way where wait, can you hear me, Mike?
So,
Okay. So I can see it working in such a way where, you know, we have a lot of subcultures here in the United States. We have a lot of subcultures here. So, if you're taking the best of, say, like your regional cultures, and you're using these platforms to export these cultural products out, then you can have, you can have like your own niche, in terms of like a cultural product that you're putting out into the world. I mean, you can have
mhm,
that if like you said, if look from a group perspective, if everyone sort of has like a collectivized way of using the technology, where that's what they're looking to do, is they're looking to extrapolate on what's valuable in their culture. I mean, all other cultures do that.
mhm,
They all of them do that. Like, look, Germans take pride in the cars that they make. You
mhm,
know, and just think about all the other things that we covet. In terms of like products that are exported from other countries because they come from those countries. So the opposite
mhm,
can be true about products that are created by us, and let's just say even like you know regions like the South or the West Coast or the East Coast. We all have uniqueness about our locales. There's things that make us unique, and if you can create from that space and export out much like they do, then it posits to say that we can see the same type of the same type of trade benefits.
mhm, mhm. And it also has to be a bi-directional or bilateral perspective as well, right? So yeah, you can absorb, as a Black person, you can absorb all the cultural intelligence from others, but what can they absorb from you, right? If a Palestinian is approaching you or engaging you, what can they pull from you? Well, if you have that sort of Black experience, which is that of being underprivileged and oppressed, largely due to institutional racism and other other forms of discrimination, such as redlining and other areas. Well, how do you relate that to the other culture, right? That other culture is going to have to be able to leverage off of you just as much as you leverage off of them. So the
You,
strategic alliance piece is very important from a bilateral perspective.
yeah, and you know what, man? Oddly enough, in my view, without hip hop did that, because pretty much you look, no matter where you go on the planet, there's hip hop is sort of like there's an underlay of it, right? It's left its imprint no matter where you go in the world, right? The only issue with that is just that people who created it don't own it, right? It's so the one lesson that we can take away from that is, okay, do the same thing, just own it this time, just own it this time, and so you can be enriched this time because it was created but it was never owned, and that's
Hmm.
largely where we lost out. Because think about if we owned hip hop culture right now, we'd be trillionaires.
Hmm. Right, right. If we patent it, if we
Yeah, like literally, dude. If we
and
like,
it's funny. Mhm.
go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting that hip hop can be exported in a way or exploited in a way because hip hop is the culture, right? It's a part of black culture. It goes
Yeah.
part and partial to it. There is no hip hop without black people, right? But when it comes to um, you know, Judaism and things like that, you don't see people just buying random hats at you know, trinket shops and stuff like that, random little hats and putting it on their head saying "Hazza," right? They don't run around trying to emulate Jews, right? It just doesn't make any sense. But when it comes to hip hop, everyone else sees this as an opportunity to try to exploit it and try to be a part of it, while at the same time not really being a part of the struggle. So
Yeah.
their cultural intelligence tells them to exploit this aspect of black culture, but not actually immerse itself in black culture,
It's
right?
well, it's fully been commodified, man. That's the thing. It's been commodified. I mean, hell, dude. Even like the b-boy jams now are like they're all like big productions, right? They're not like how Radiotron used to be out here in LA back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
It's all like it's like sponsored by Red Bull and shit. B-boy World Championship. It's at the goddamn Olympics, dude. Did you know this? B-boying is going to be in the
Mm-hmm.
Olympics.
Yeah,
Yeah, isn't that some shit?
it's so athletic, so athletic. It just makes no
Right.
sense.
That's what I mean. It's become a thing now. Now that it becomes a thing, right? We can create like these sub industries and markets, and you know what I mean. There's probably like
Hmm.
there's probably gonna be like a b-boy, like a literally like a shoe design specifically for b-boy. In
I
the in the
think
not
Adidas.
in
I
19.
think Adidas put.
Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think Adidas put a lot of effort into trying to design their classic sneakers around b-boying as well.
Yeah.
Seeing this type of response it got, I think that we have some comments in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Dollar Will says you don't need to know other cultures in DC in any social way. Everyone works in the same areas. It's one economy. We are the majority here and do fine if we have the skill. So we're not talking about localization. We're talking about globalization. We live in a globalized market now. There is no localization anymore in terms of globalization. Rosie Race asks, I asked this question yesterday, but it didn't show up. What do you gentlemen think about a black-owned online e-commerce marketplace? I think that's actually a good idea, but it has to be in a way that's extremely robust, just as robust as the competition. Or else, what happens here is it gets measured against what's already available and what's already functioning very well. So, if it's going to be an alternative to non-black e-commerce, online e-commerce places, then it has to be just as good, if not exceed it, or have a unique feature that makes it, keeps the people coming back. So,
And I would say also like collectivized distribution networks.
Hmm.
so that so what you could do is, you can, again, um, if you have things like, so people own things like trade groups, you know, then what it is that you can pull from a whole entire catalog of items and products that are, that are like either like specialty made, or there's something that's
Hmm.
unique to this catalog of product, and then what you could do is you can get with another entity in another place, and then you do volume trade, where we're really exporting, and we're trying to get an imprint in other places, taking local product and putting it elsewhere, you know
Hmm.
so, I can see it also as far as like, where you're talking about that robustness, that has to be like the underpinnings behind it. There's a retail
Hmm.
space up front, but in the back there's an actual international trade initiative behind a lot of it. So in order to
Hmm.
boost production locally for export, as well as like the domestic market.
Hmm. All right, let me get to this next piece. All right, this next piece is actually a more a deeper science behind cultural intelligence. So these are actually structural models for cultural intelligence. So there's a cycle right here that involves the cultural security. So basically, from left to right, compounding political clout, the exploitation during international conflict. This is the political piece of it. Strategic shift from reactive to preemptive strategy. International conventions and bilateral treaties. I talked about that earlier. Having bilateral relationships from the protection of cultural property, or for the protection of cultural property. This would include something like hip hop. We should be actually protecting it and putting the clamps down. But there are so many
Bingo.
people who who cape for we are the world, and that doesn't always work. So it gets exploited. So there's no protections in place. And then the cultural intelligence piece at the bottom actually refers to the strategic shift.
That's a
And
very
then you have
interesting.
technical.
I was just saying that's a very interesting infographic right there.
Mhm.
What were you saying?
And this
What were you
piece
saying about
right.
What were you saying about a cultural shift?
No, that
Oh, Mike, I think you might have cut out there.
can you hear me now?
There you go. Yeah, I can hear you.
All right.
Yeah, can you go ahead and repeat that? You cut out right as you started to talk.
Oh, I was referring to the political economy of cultural property.
Okay.
So this graphic right here. So basically, from the top to the bottom and from left to right, uh, politics, uh, activism comes out of politics, which provides, which goes hand in hand with economics, and then it structures down into security, and the security aspect is a part of cultural identity. So black people are constantly trying to protect themselves from um, let's say small businesses run by non-black people in predominantly black neighborhoods. It's a form of protectionism that black people are imposing on these businesses by either boycott and divest and sanctions, or by just protesting it, right? So that's their way of protectionism from a security standpoint that engages the political aspect that drives the economic aspect.
Hmm. Versus,
And again,
I was gonna say versus saying like the competition approach, right? To where what it is you actually drive out, you drive out the competition through business, right? As opposed to like a redaction or like you said boycotts or things of that sort. No, what you did is that you reroute the capital flow or the flow of capital,
mhm.
right? You make it to a disadvantage, right, for anyone to come in to do business. It'd be like you trying to open up shop in Chinatown. Good luck.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, yeah. That's actually a good point. That's actually a very good point. Um, Even here, Vietnamese kind of separate themselves from Chinese people. They have their own district that they gentrified of white people, right? So they kind of pushed white people out and took over the actual neighborhood, which I find to be very interesting. Um, but even they are very protectionist in that regard in terms of
Hmm.
culture, right? So they're leveraging their culture for economic purposes, which is political as well, right? So they may be communists or they may be liberals or whatever the position is that they take, conservative or liberal, whatever it is. They still leverage their political aspect to economics and security. Whereas black people, um, our cultural, our cultural identity is always under it's perceived to be always under attack, and therefore it drives our political it drives our
Yeah.
political views at the ballot as well as in our everyday interactions with people. So we're kind of isolationists in that regard. So there's a lack of cultural intelligence coming out of majority black circles because they are, they're
What's I'm trying to think of the
cultural.
term. There's a sociology term. Is it like justice politics or something like that? There's a
Yes.
term that they give it, right? Where
Hmm.
your basically your political disposition, if you will, is
Hmm.
is based on like justice issues. Like that's the basis of it,
Hmm.
right? It's not maybe like a part of a
Hmm.
different sort of like national like agenda, cultural agenda, right? It's not a part of it.
Hmm.
It's actually the basis of it. It drives
Yeah.
it drives your political viewpoints. It drives like what it is that you seek from your politicians or your representatives that you're looking to support, right? Kind of it basically it sort of
Hmm.
it's like the backbone of like your political philosophy, and then from there all of the policies that you
Hmm.
support.
Hmm. Hmm. Right, and that's what that matrix. Well, I should say this image is representing. So we this is the model that black people can actually follow in order to drive their own internal cultural intelligence, right? In order to build a functional model.
I'm gonna check out the chat and see what comments we have.
So the next one is compounding political clout. So the phases of recovery, return, revitalization, redefinition um, recur for the wartime art crimes of World War II, the Cold War era, and the post-Cold War period. Re, Restitution of Nazi plunder began during World War II and continues into the post-Cold War period. Reparation of looted and um, um, antiquities began during the Cold War era and also continues to continues into the post-Cold War period. Resolution of the preceding wartime art crimes predicts that destruction of cultural property and trafficking in art of the post-Cold War period will require phases of indemnification. So, actually, let me read this one last sentence. Political meaning develops in parallel with the phases of resolution of wartime art crime. Nazi and Soviet plunder of World War II created opportunities to garner goodwill through recovery and reparations, while the process of restitution led to the consensus through international conventions in the Cold War era. In the post Cold War period, unresolved cases offered points of political leverage and added to the cachet of cultural property tainted by wartime art crime. Antiquities looted during the Cold War era also acquired political clout with phases of repatriation. Repatriation, sorry. The potential for art crimes of the post-Cold War period to follow the same route indicates the political risks will follow from unresolved abuses against cultural property. So this is something that Black people have been kind of fighting as well, right? The idea of reparations for slavery, right? And a lot of the injustices that happened during Black Wall Street. Black people are still fighting for that to this very day. So you see this political clout being leveraged against what we consider to be the privileged class or the ruling class, which is white people. And there's enough historic information available that is being used as data points to say, hey, there should be some form of compensation for what is considered to be an atrocity back then. And how do Black people actually, what leverage do Black people have to actually get those reparations, right? Because they don't have a standing military, they're not politically organized in that way. You might have local politicians, right? You might have a city council member or some kind of state representative, but that's not your own independent body. So looking at this image right here, it discusses the political violence and trafficking in art, looting of antiquities, how many so it has the Goodwill Act at the bottom, and then it has consensus of Cold War era, and then it has post Cold War period, which is the leverage and cachet. So
the whole thing about the whole you know stealing of art, stuff like that.
mhm,
You know, um, see, because in the stories of conquest, when you watch all those old World War II documentaries, you know, Hitler and Germany, basically, and the all of the plundering being done. There's so in the conquest, right? There's the booty, the treasure,
mhm,
right? There was the political reasons for what was done, but see, then there's like the crown jewels, if you will, or those hidden gems. That
mhm,
if you ever watch like movies like Oceans, I think it was Oceans 12, man. That was the good version, or uh, one that I liked. Where they were stealing art. They were stealing all kind of like very expensive pieces of art and stuff, and they were over in Italy, and over in the European
mhm,
countries, like just gallivanting from country to country, stealing stuff, because there's there's value in conquest,
mhm,
and like in art pieces are sort of like some of the crown jewels, right? That's what's finer than art,
mhm,
you know.
mhm,
So so for that, yeah, man, that was one of the key things in conquest, like those cultural, um, those things those things created in culture that are invaluable. That's what I'm trying to say.
mhm.
You know, like put a price on the Mona Lisa. You can't.
Mhm. Right. So that's cultural property, right? But when it comes to black people, their cultural property is their livelihood, right? Their humanity is is a part of their cultural property. And how do you compensate? How do black people get go about getting compensation from the thieves who stole their livelihood, their humanity
Right.
as a people in America, right? So you would have to build from a cultural intelligence standpoint, you would have to build a coalition of interested and like-minded people who also have been um, robbed and faced the same uncertainties and impacts, right? So once you can build your coalition, then you can build a better case, and then you can actually leverage all of the all of the historic information and then use that as a weapon, which is what Africans are using right now, right? They're going to the British, and they're going to the French, and they're going to the European Union members and saying, "Hey, we want our artifacts back." And how that impacts them is that, well, if you're not going to give us reparations, what we're going to do is we're going to collapse your economy in some form of way by taking back our worldly possessions, right? So if we're taking back those African pieces out of Britain or out of London and out of Paris, well, guess what? 90% of those artifacts and artistic pieces that are inside those museums and libraries are made up of African and Asian um, artifacts. So what happens to their economy if you pull all of that stuff out?
Yeah.
Um, it collapses.
Yeah. I mean, it was just like what we were speaking about earlier, like on a more like neighborhood level, like having somebody, you know, with the local little grocery store or whatever selling you subpar
Mhm.
produce, but not owned by anyone who looks like you. Okay, well, you're gonna have to redivert. You know, you have to do things from an economic block type of mind frame. You know, to
Mhm.
kind of force the scenario. That's really how you have to get shit done. You know, it does
Mhm.
take money, but it's done not in the sense that we, you know, traditionally think. It's in our application of capital, how we allocate
Mhm.
it. You know, does it circulate? It doesn't circulate much in the black community. You know,
Mhm.
doesn't circulate much. So, you know, what can you can't do much if you don't have much circulating. The more you got circulating,
Right.
yeah, the more you can do something.
Right. And you would actually need you would actually need people that can actually be organized around all of this. So you need you would need a commission, right, in some form of committee that can actually spend a whole lot of time looking into this.
Oh yeah, we have any comments or anything?
I'm not in front of my
Oh,
laptop,
okay,
so you
hold
can
on.
check for yourself.
See. Gentrification. Oh, okay, that was she's talking to Dollar Will.
Hmm.
Okay. Okay. Did you have another piece you wanted to go to?
I actually want to finish up this topic and then go on to the last piece, which is Manosphere 3.0.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So getting back to the piece about reparations for Black people and how they can, leverage cultural intelligence for that. You still need to build this coalition, right? You still need to build contacts and other uh, people outside of your normal network and expand your network. Unfortunately, as we see on places in the manosphere or places on social media, especially the manosphere in particular, you see people unwilling. There's an unwillingness to actually um, to adopt a cultural intelligence model. They'll make up things, but they don't actually have. There's a perception, and then there's reality, and then what happens here is the perception becomes the reality rather than the reality actually be the reality.
Right.
So when it's time to actually build a network outside of the black community, I saw on one panel where a brother who lived in London by the name of Babatunde, he was attacked because of his accent, not because he wasn't black, but because of his accent. He had a British accent, and therefore he's been marginalized from other melanated people just based on an accent alone. So what happens when it's time to build a global coalition? Can't build it because you've already isolated yourself from the rest of those people.
I don't really have much to follow up on that one because I mean, because that's sort of like, okay, we can't. That's like the first hurdle, right? Now,
Mm-hmm.
if we're having trouble with that hurdle, good luck to
Mm-hmm.
us, right? Because the fact of the matter is that I don't listen to when I speak to someone and they have an accent. Okay, what it is that what I try to do is I try to understand the inflections of the accent so that I can extrapolate what they're trying to say in English. That's the whole reason why you try to get acclimated to different accents. I always make it a habit when
Exactly.
someone speaks to me in an accent. I try to take a stab at what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And say Dutch.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, Dutch. I'm like, oh, okay. Or sometimes you have people who speak Spanish, right? But there's different dialects, right? See, so somebody who is, you know, somebody say like Honduran, for example. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I knew a brother from Honduras, and like he kind of spoke like it was almost like a Jamaican Spanish, and it's far different from like how Latinos from Mexico speak, which is what I'm accustomed to. So even those types of things, it's good to actually uh it's actually good to understand accents,
Mm-hmm.
so to understand like where they, because you can identify, you can place people, you can geoplace people based on an accent. Again, we're talking about, that's data that you're getting from someone
Mm-hmm.
speaks to you, they say an accent, and immediately you can place where they're from,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? And
And
then
that
you can
starts the
have,
conversation.
there you go. So
Mm-hmm.
there's actually intelligence in this shit. As soon as you start, I mean, dude, that's why I kind of laughed it off and I said, "Shit, dude, this is hurdle number one," because look, if you don't really see it from that angle and that perspective, how an action is an actual data point when we're talking about intelligence gathering. If you don't see it that way, then damn, dude, that means I'm not sure how much intelligence you actually imply in your conversations on a daily basis.
Or even learning the language, right? I used to work at the airport in IT, and I ran into a couple of brothers. This was years ago, and I think they spoke Japanese fluently. They were on their way either to Japan or coming from Japan, but they spoke Japanese fluently. How they learned this, I have no idea. But the ability to leverage someone else's language to your advantage is actually a part of that cultural security, right? As well as cultural intelligence. But security is the component of cultural intelligence. So how does that work for you uh, in the fourth industrialization going forward, right? So now you have this globalized market. Going back to that, the security aspect allows you
Hmm.
to, the intelligence aspect allows you to build a security portfolio internally to say, okay, if things don't work out here, I could always lamp there because I speak the language, I know the people, I got the contacts. I'm always, I'm upwardly mobile, basically. That's a true upwardly mobile brother, right? The brother who can make moves and understand language and linguistics, right?
They say that, what they call that, a digital nomad.
Yeah. And now you're talking about machine learning, right? So machine learning is basically the algorithms used to parse data. Well, how much data are we collecting? Collecting a whole lot. If you're an upwardly mobile brother, right? If you're Manosphere 3.0, then you're collecting a whole lot of data. That's just normal. How you process it is going to be, uh, up to each and every individual. But the point of the matter here is you're collecting data, you're processing the data through algorithms, and further analysis is coming from understanding the other cultures as well, right? So let me bring back up this image. So here we have this image that shows that how can I adapt, right? Interest, both intrinsic and extrinsic, right? Motivation and confidence, right? You hear the way Paul Bryant speaks. He's in Germany. He speaks the language. He has no problem mingling with other people, and then he can come back and still talk, and still speak truth to power for his people, right? That sort of upward mobility is very important in terms of gathering cultural intelligence and building cultural intelligence, right? And I'm just going back over this one more time before we close out. And then you have the knowledge pieces. How is it similar to my other experiences? Well, yeah, you've been stopped by police in America. Well, those guys have been stopped by Zionist occupiers, right? Going down other roads. And then strategy and action. But the main point I was trying to make was that how can I adapt? Well, how you adapt is the ability to pick up on other languages and study linguistics of others as you build out your network. So, what were
Yeah,
you saying, Complex?
all of these things are very key, man. All of them.
Mhm. Mhm.
They all have a large part to
It.
play in how you'll be able to move in the world, going into the future.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. This ties into Manosphere 3.0, right? So we've been talking about this the last few weeks. What makes us 3.0? What is Manosphere 3.0? What are the some of the components, some of the subcomponents of this? Well, if you think about cultural intelligence, that's exactly what we're talking about. Self improvement is another piece of it, right? It's the early piece of the compliance piece, right? So there's several areas of compliance that ties in with Manosphere 3.0, and self improvement is one of the uh, uh, early early stages of it, and then you take in the cultural intelligence, and then cultural property and cultural security,
Yep.
innovation, right? Innovation. So innovative ideas come from complex conversations, right? So to put it into perspective and to recap, self improvement, and then you take in uh, cultural intelligence, cultural security, cultural property, and then you take in to consideration innovation, right? So we're constantly thinking of new ideas. We
Yep.
actually put multi-million-dollar idea on the table without actually,
Too many of them.
without putting a watermark on it, right? Without putting any
Far too many of
intellectual,
them, man.
yeah, any intellectual watermarks on it.
Yep. Crap. You know what?
But if you did it, but if you do it, then what happens here is we already know where it came from because we thought of it. When we were talking about Walmart, not Walmart, Amazon buying Sears, we were talking about that 3 months before it even happened.
Yep. Discussing the pros and cons of why it would or wouldn't make sense.
Mhm. Mhm. What were you gonna say?
No, and I was going to say all those things, um, all of those things you mentioned, in my view, actually undergird, right, self improvement. So, all told, all of those things, pursuit, taking interest in all of those things,
Mhm.
actually leads to your self improvement, and not this narrative that women somehow do it. No, this is how it's actually done.
Mhm.
This is you literally self improve, like pursuing this shit. You literally do it. Like the evidence
Hmm.
is we just discussed it. We just crunched the data on that shit.
Hmm. But I would also put into perspective that maybe sapiosexualism of
Hmm.
women actually plays a role in this as well, right? So the innovative piece and the cultural intelligence piece actually draws that particular female into it. So I don't want to discredit or discount the female aspect, but you're right in the sense that has less to do with the opposite sex and more to do with introspectiveness of yourself.
Yeah, I think because over the
Hmm.
last few days, like on Rainy Woman's channel, we've been discussing that in
Hmm.
detail, right? And so, I mean,
Hmm.
even okay, that might not serve as like it's not. See, that's the attractive qualifier, right? That's the attractive element. It's not necessarily the reason for it. It's the attract. That's the reason why someone else would be attracted to you. You know. So again, that's why it's sort of like all of those things actually lead to the self improvement, and then there would be like the counterpart, right? The female counterpart who will find that okay, that's the guy who's at parity for me, and then I think that at higher levels of function, it's more of a element of sapiosexualism, like what we had been discussing over the last couple of days. So yeah, you're right. It's not to discredit that element, right?
Hmm.
But I'm saying but as just as a person taking like a hardcore interest in these things and looking to one acquire data by being culturally intelligent, pursuing cultural intelligence, and then two, um, actually embracing language as a source of information and knowledge. Like we even
Hmm.
discussed about we just discussed like the benefits of actually being able to identify accents. You know,
Hmm.
so all of those things make you a well-rounded person, right? That and so
Hmm.
yeah, no, point taken.
No, absolutely. I think you made a good point as well. So, yeah. So, in terms of Manosphere 3.0 compliance, you have to ask yourself how many other platforms on YouTube are actually doing this, right? Very few. Maybe you can count on one hand how many are doing this. It's just so many. It, the Manosphere isn't so much as diverse, but it's really wide and girthed, right? So
Mhm.
it's always expanding, but it never actually scales up. It just scales out,
Yeah, I
and
was gonna say it kind
and
of
it's
takes like a Hydra effect, guys. It kind of just goes outwards.
right, right, right. It doesn't scale out. It scale. I mean, it scales out, but it doesn't scale up. And the lack of vertical scalability is actually why the Manosphere hasn't really gone beyond 2.0, right? So uh, the lack of cultural intelligence comes into play in this because what you have is a demographic that has scaled out and has not um, engaged on a higher level.
Yeah,
In in Manosphere 3.0, we talk about innovation, innovative ideas come out of complex conversations. A lot of the conversations are very simplistic. They're not actually dynamic or complex at all. So you go to many channels and it's the same thing over and over and over and over again. And those channels seem to be very popular because that's the consensus of the demographics, right? It says that if I am if I am basic in my way of thinking, then I see no reason to actually elevate myself, and therefore my cultural intelligence on a scale of 1 to 10 is actually at 0, right? It has never gone beyond where it started from.
right. And Mike. And here's the crazy part about that. So there's also an algorithm that feeds into this, right? See, so part of this is one's own self-interest driving this, and then the other is say like, so for example, YouTube's algorithm that basically feeds you content
Mm-hmm.
suggestions, right, based on your searches
Mm-hmm.
and on your view time and and all that shit. So again, there's data there's data that backs a lot of this, right? It's the human machine
Mhm.
interfacing here, and how much of your intelligence, right, is you actually putting it into your mind yourself versus what an algorithm is feeding you. You know what I mean? If
Mhm.
you diversified your YouTube feed, then you'd start to get different things, and then you start to learn different things. But if you just hop from channel, like you said, like this flattened out, scaled out black manosphere, and you go from channel to channel to channel, you're basically just getting the same thing from different voices, and you're not
Mhm.
going to really get much in that. I mean, because hell, even on that level, if that voice has an accent, oh shit, oh man, this guy, you know what I mean? So you're not even on that level. You're not even trying to get whatever value you could get from that level. You're not even trying to get, you know.
Mhm.
So yeah, this, but here's what happens typically when you go from like a version 1 to a version 2, and then a version 2 to a version 3. There's going to be drastic change in that, and sometimes drastic change
Mhm.
happens swift and sudden, you know. And so, and this what we're discussing may be a bit swift, and it may be a bit sudden, but it's needed also,
Mhm.
you know, because all of
Right.
these things that we did. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, dude. Go ahead.
No, no, go right ahead. Go right ahead. I was agreeing with you.
Oh, because I'm just saying, man, all of these things that we discussed here. I mean, really does, if in all truthfulness, man, um, that basically breaks down how we think by and large.
Mhm.
What a lot of those infographics and a lot of that hardcore information we discussed here, that is sort of like the underlying pervading mindset that a lot of the brain trust does possess. I would say all. you know and so what we're really trying to do is just sort of impress upon um, what we want to call like a Manosphere 3.0 compliant platform. These have to be like the core tenets. This has to be the core tenet.
Mhm. Let me just pull up this one more image because I think that it might be relevant to what we're referring to here. Hmm. Oh, okay. All right, this image right here. Basically, it talks about multiple intelligences: IQ, EQ, CQ. We discussed this earlier. So intelligence, emotional, and cultural. And we point to the emotional aspect. Focuses on developing an understanding of an ability to manage emotions can be enhanced throughout life. Recently understood to be an important predicator or predictor of one's potential for success. Fosters understanding and management of your own emotions. Promotes positive relationships. Increases self motivation and drive. Right. So I think we went over before that cultural intelligence actually starts with drive, right? So what is your motivation? That's a part of it. So the IQ piece actually focuses on developing cognitive abilities, more academically oriented, right? So that's your educated lane. Generally thought to be established at birth, has been traditionally used to predict potential for one's success. Allows development of needed knowledge base, enables development of technical skills and abilities, enables conceptual thinking. So EQ, IQ, DQ all seems to come into play. You can't have one without the other. So
But we've always been, we've always used just IQ as a primer. I think that's
mhm,
the thing. I don't think that
mhm.
we've really viewed intelligence as sort of like an art and a science, right? That has all these various components that can determine the type of intelligence one has an orientation towards, right? We've always just talked about the importance of IQ, right? We point to Einstein, so yeah, he has an IQ of 1,000,000. Okay, as if that really means something significant. You know what I mean? IQ is just a piece of it. There's two other pieces to the puzzle.
Right. Right. And I would argue that we spend more time on EQ than we spend on IQ and CQ, right?
Yep. Yep. And don't even know it. We don't know that EQ is actually what we have a high, we have a I don't even want to know. I don't even want to discuss like what level of intelligence the EQ is, right? In terms of that intelligence component that we possess, but yeah, the other two,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, aren't even largely in the picture.
Mm-hmm. Right, and that this all ties in with cultural intelligence, but I think this is a broader picture, right? So for cultural component, cultural strategic thinking, what you think and how you solve problems, motivation, energized and persistent actions, behavior is adaptive actions and behaviors. So you go down to Brazil, you learn capoeira, but if you've been breakdancing your whole life, or you broke dance before, for that matter,
You were doing it.
capoeira just becomes natural, and
Yep.
same thing and vice versa. If you've done capoeira before, doing 90s on your wrists and stuff like that just becomes natural. Um,
It's a part of an American
but
dance, basically.
mm,
No, what I'm saying
well,
is, what I'm
cultural.
saying is, yeah, that's what I mean. So for a capoeirista, doing a 90 is just, in the form of a dance. Like for him, he's injecting, his cultural knowledge into a dance that's based in, the Bronx. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Oh, I was just about to say something. EQ promotes positive relationships, increases self motivation and drive. I think we discussed that before. Um, Generally thought to be evolved with time and life experiences, has been historically used to sustain relationships and social group acceptance, allows development of in-group knowledge and acceptance, enables development of declarative knowledge or knowledge about the state of things. Right, I would think that identifies a brain trust to a T.
Yep. Yep.
Valued as a strategic competitive advantage for building mutual beneficial relationships. That last one is key. Let me read it again. Valued as a strategic competitive advantage for building mutual beneficial relationships. So we talk about globalization and things of that globalization, and we talk about from the business aspect as well as the industrialization aspect. You're going to need that last piece of cultural intelligence, um, valued as a strategic competitive advantage for building mutual beneficial relationships. Uh, but if you hide behind a hashtag, you can never really gain that level of cultural intelligence. You really screwed yourself out. I'm only using this diagram or this slide to put emphasis behind what we've been saying the whole entire time. A lot of people probably heard the anniversary hangout and didn't understand what is this Manosphere 3.0. What are you guys talking about? I don't have to comply with that. Who do you guys think you are, right? And, they don't understand it, right? Because for them, Manosphere is just Manosphere, but to us, Manosphere is not Manosphere, right? Manosphere has variations, it has versions, right? 1.0, maybe 1.7 or something like that, and then it went to 2.0, and then it went to 2.5 with monetization of super chats and things like that, and then it kind of just kind of stood there in the GitHub or whatever the version space that it's in, and then it got stuck, and then the brain trust came along and really pushed the envelope and said that there needs to be new version history, right? So Manosphere was kind of open source for black men, right? In that regard, from a technical standpoint, it was really open source. The first contributing members are no longer here, so somebody else picked up the code, but they put a lot of garbage into the code. And what happened with the code is it exploded into many other lines of code that was unnecessary. There was no right. There was no quality of assurance. There was no QE.
Yeah,
there was no site reliability engineer. Yeah, a lot of bloat. It needed more memory, right? So you had to have more memory in order to absorb a lot of the garbage, because the information was garbage to begin with.
And what happens with computers when they do that, man? They run hot, a lot of energy consumption. It's not an efficient use of your hardware.
Right. You try to move your mouse around, and the mouse moves really slow. It's like kind of like having those toolbars. Most people's grandparents usually use a computer for the first time. And it has all these toolbars everywhere on their browser, and its computer's running slow. There's a lot of lag, right? So that's what Manosphere 2.0, 2.5 basically had become. It just became bloatware. Unnecessary apps, free apps, AOL free services, and Yahoo toolbars, and all this crazy stuff on there. All these crazy things on there. It didn't make a whole lot of sense. So once the technocrats came along with their IQ, EQ, and CQ all in place, especially the last piece was cultural intelligence, came into place. It caused disruption and cleaned up a lot of the code. So rather than to rebuild the code that's there, just start with new code, fresh from the start, right? Yep. New lines of code.
Yep.
Right? So now you have all these new lines of code inside this Manosphere 3.0, and it's not compatible with the old stuff at all. It's not compatible, right? It's like having a Nintendo 64 and still trying to use old NES games on it. Well, guess what? Cartridge is too big, buddy. It's not going to fit.
No.
Mm-hmm.
No, this is. I mean, this is. It's part of the course, man. Like I said, sometimes things, the change could be subtle or sudden. And so oftentimes when there's no in this sphere anyway, because a lot of it is discussions that are being had. So if the discussions don't evolve over time, then essentially what happens is that there's just sort of like a leapfrog effect that takes place. And like you said, fresh code has to get, we have to deploy the new code, the new service pack, or whatever analogy you want to give it. But it had to be deployed. Had to do it now. And the reason. Go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I was just going to
say, and just the reason being is because we may sound a bit pompous, maybe saying these things, but the reality is that the data backs up a different narrative, and that's a narrative that we push every time we do hangouts with regards to space and tech, economics, geopolitics, hemp, cannabis, blockchain, IT, all the stuff. Okay, so the information that we're providing, in all actuality, backs up what we're talking about, right? So again, we have to start relying less on that EQ, start incorporating more of the IQ and the CQ.
Wait, say that one more time.
No, I was just saying, like, we got to stop using so much of the EQ and start
Mhm.
proportioning, use equal proponents of IQ and CQ. Or hell, maybe if you're oriented more towards the IQ side, then bump it up a little bit more. But let's stop relying so much on the EQ. Don't take what we're saying personally. Shit, like I said, the information that we provide on a weekly basis backs up what we're talking about.
Right. Right, and that comes from the cultural intelligence piece. Largely, it's a cultural intelligence piece because you can
Um,
boost your IQ through various means, but if you don't have the cultural intelligence piece, you're really stuck, right? It's kind of like those, in Silicon Valley, there was a lot of guys who contributed to to the development of the PC and what it is today.
mhm,
But they were stuck in their dormitories or in their garages. They really did not have that ability to interact with different cultures. Recently, when Silicon Valley started pushing for diversity and inclusion, and I've heard several different CEOs. I think even the CEO of IBM has talked about this. Jenny from IBM. They talk about how once they started diversifying their workforce, they got different results that they didn't have before.
mm,
I've heard it on more than one occasion, right? So
yeah,
I think Apple has talked about this. Google and Facebook has talked about this. That once they started hiring different groups of people, from different areas, uh, they got better results, right? People see things differently. They had different cultures. That cultural intelligence allowed a mega corporation or a mega tech giant to leverage their human capital that was diverse and having their own internal cultural intelligence to say this guy's from India, this guy's from Nigeria, this guy's from so on and so on and so forth. And when you put all those people in the room, you tend to get different. You tend to get um, very different results, right? Whereas if you put only white men in the room, you kind of get the same result over and over. It's very cyclical, and that's a lot of companies have figured out that that's part of their problem, right? They're always getting the same exact thing over and over and over. But it wasn't until you started getting more diversity that you started to get more variations in products and design.
yep, yeah. And I mean, that's kind of how you have to, you have to acquire it. You have to. It's all data acquisition at all times. And you can't.
Mhm.
It can't just come from one source. It has to come from a multitude of sources if you want to have the best chance of success. You need to be able to synthesize the best of the most sources you can get.
Mhm.
Um, Mike, you want you have well, go ahead and then let's maybe I'll go through the chat.
All right. No, I was just going to say that that's what's going to make Manosphere 3.0 what with the makes that's largely what's going to make the components of Manosphere 3.0 resilient, right? So when we talk about culture of resilience. That resilience is going to come from the intelligence aspect and the security and cultural properties, right? So the Black Brain Trust is cultural property within social media. The resilience aspect is going to come from um, try to get my thoughts together. Hold on a second. I'm actually
Well, one thing I would say in terms of resilience, um, you know, I think it comes from us being, you know, active on a consistent basis,
hmm
you know, and consistently being on top of what's going on, and then putting the information together in an organized, structured manner. and being consistent with it. That to me, that's a form of resilience.
That is what I was referring to was basically building a culture of resilience meant what I was referring to was more about the ability to have the capability to maintain and develop within itself, right?
Okay.
And when faced with uncertainty and other social challenges, right? You think about how did Black people go from slavery to Black Wall Street in a matter of 30 years, right? So what slavery ended in 1865. Black Wall Street, the first iterations of Black Wall Street started showing up around the 1890s, right? So 65, 75, 1875, and then by 1895, you started seeing growth, right? If you use that period of time as a reference, can Black people go from 2020 to 2050 and make it, right? We're in a better place now than what you know, um, the enslaved people, Black people came out of, right? So can Black people go from 2020 to 2050 and survive? Based on the previous trajectory, I would say they could, but based on the content that I'm seeing in social media, I would say no. So cultural resilience, what I'm speaking to right now is that cultural resilience means that um, the ability to face uncertainty and challenges, especially in the digital age, and still be able to still be able to adapt and to the change
Right.
in circumstances.
I follow. I follow. Okay. Okay.
Hmm.
All right. So I'll take the macro view on that. Um. So yeah, sorry. Okay. So what is the value of what we produce, right? That is exported culturally, right? How much can we lean on that? How much can we leverage that? You know, what kind of stake does it give us globally, right? So, well, like you said, during like uncertain times, what kind of value do we hold globally, right? That'll kind of steady the ship, if you will. So what is it that we create that gives us that? That's what we need to look at. And it's just like you said,
Hmm.
when you scan around, you don't see much.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
what is this going to be then? Now that has to be the question, because if we've determined that you don't really see shit, then okay, well then I guess we better damn well start, right? And if we are going to start, what is it going to be? And let's get to cracking on it. I mean, that's kind of like the course of action that needs to be taken, because as we've discussed earlier, a lot of the technology that exists now that we have on our phones and how quick and easy it is we can communicate with someone in another place makes it that easy for us to be able to conduct business on a global scale. We have to be able to have the intelligence to leverage on the power of something like that. So what is it that we're creating? What are we producing that will create demand on the global market that we can convert using technology instantaneously?
Hmm.
We need a higher application of intelligence to be thinking along these lines to leverage on what it is that we have today and going into the future. This is how it's going to happen.
Hmm. That there needs to be a framework put in place, and this is just beyond the manosphere, but in manosphere in particular, there needs to be a framework put in place, and that's what this whole entire 3.0 compliance is about. Um,
Mike, let me find our graphic. We have a consortium graphic.
Mhm.
because I think that really does. Let me look for it. I think that really does. Let's see here. Shoot, I gotta find it. But I think it kind of encapsulates what we're saying as far as like looking at things from a global perspective. If we were to like give it a give it a visual, you can go ahead. And, I'm gonna go ahead and it's on my desktop, so let me dig it up. Give me a second.
Mhm. Yeah. So what I was referring to earlier was just basically Reconstruction period, uh, post 1865, and when you think about the first iterations of Black Wall Street, 1890s, you see that it took 30 plus. It took 30 years for the emergence of a emergence within the second industrial revolution to take place. So at least for Black people to have resilience in this area, right? So the ability to come out of that situation actually is telling, right? So that actually can give hope to. Let me share that. That actually can give hope, right? So you do hope that this does work out, but based on the current situation, I don't know. I don't know whether coastal resilience is there, right? It seems really absent.
Right. Can you see
You want,
that?
yeah, we can see that. You can go ahead and read it off.
Okay. So it all starts with having a global initiatives. So this is where your collectivized agendas, right, have to be put into an actionable items, your initiatives, and how this is going to extend out globally. Okay. And then, given that it's the globe, it breaks down into your international as well as domestic. So what we were referencing before, having the e-commerce, right, marketplace. Yeah, that serves as your retail interface, right? So consumers can, purchase and, do business with Black producers domestically, right? But then on the back end,
Mhm.
we're speaking to also having trade groups involved with these producers so that we're also exporting internationally. So we're talking about the trade and the infrastructure that supports it. And on the domestic side, policy, right? So that speaks to the reparations or social equity piece. And
Mhm.
in our view, I'll say in my view specifically, and it's a view that's shared with others on the Brain Trust, but I largely see reparations being had through infrastructure changes. And I think that there have been things that have been put on the table here um, that sort of addressed it from that angle. In certain industries, we did a cannabis hangout just last Sunday, and we were talking about this in depth. But there are specific industries where, you know, a lot of the talk with regards to reparations and then circling it around in the hemp and cannabis industries had to do with infrastructure and access to the industry itself. In addition to the expungement of, charges and, you know, crimes that someone was charged with that were cannabis related. So that's the policy side. But I'm giving you real world examples of what these things mean. And then, when we talk about, like I said, the information that we provide on all of the hangouts that we do, we reference all of the regions. We're talking the globe. We're talking Asia, Eurasia, Africa, and the Arab states, Europe, the Americas, you know, the islands and the territories. We're talking about everything that is comprised of land that sits above water. Okay, and what goes on in all of these areas. So, tech and resources being, the key areas of focus in Asia. infrastructure, trade, and brain capital being the key areas of focus in Africa and the Arab states, global finance in Europe, and then the Americas, social equity, real estate, business technology, and resource and acquisition and infrastructure in the islands and territories. So this is to give you, I don't know what would this fall under, what, IQ or CQ?
What are you doing, business tech?
This type of stuff right here, where we're engaging more of what it is that we consume, right? Like, so let's say like the news, so that you watch a Bloomberg piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in your mind, you listen to what they're talking about, and this chart should pop up in your head, and that news piece should probably fit into some of these boxes. You know what I mean?
I would
Like,
say it. I would say it falls into a couple of the areas, right? It can transcend a couple of those areas, right?
okay.
What I would also add is that the emotional aspect would be righteous indignation due to injustices, right? Institutional injustices, right?
Mhm.
So the institutional frameworks that have forced a lot of black and brown men to go into incarceration due to the flooding of narcotics into these neighborhoods, right? And the disproportionate rate of stop and frisk is a part of the EQ piece that has led to a more CQ piece.
Okay, I follow.
So people listen to this. EQ is emotional intelligence, and CQ is cultural intelligence. So what I was referring to was that the institutional injustices practiced against black and brown people in terms of the drug war has forced a lot of these people, a lot of black people into incarceration that has led to disenfranchisement, which is the part of the EQ piece. But then the CQ piece, um, which is the cultural intelligence piece, allows them to create social equity programs to counter a lot of the institutional practices of injustice.
Okay. I just wanted to show that because again, what this should do is when you kind of follow our hangouts, you should have this in mind, right? This You should have this graphic in mind, and when we discuss these things, again, think about what boxes that news item references, right? So if we're talking about China, for example, or Asia, we're going to start here. Or are we talking about policy? Are we talking about trade? Are we talking about the technology that's coming from there? So you can check these two boxes. But if we're talking about China with regards to, say, Trump's tariffs or something, then we're going to check this box and this box over here and this box up here,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this is all what we're trying to lay upon you is sort of like the line of logic or the way of thought, as it relates to Manosphere 3.0. We're going to be holarchic thinkers, and
Mm.
we're gonna think with the globe in mind.
Right. No, that chart is actually very relevant to this discussion. But we're gonna have way more discussions after this too, right? On cultural intelligence, we're gonna do this every single week, if not twice a week. Just banging on a lot of these issues because I think the manosphere is in need of their own GDPR, right? This sort of regulatory body that needs to go in place and start gentrifying and basically putting up these little pop-ups on a pop-up should come on your screen when you go into the manosphere, right? Kind of like says, well, if you accept this, if you press OK to this or accept this, then you're acknowledging that cookies are going to be a part of your browser and we're going to collect information about you, right? the manosphere has a similar pop-up that should say, like, if you come here, you're on your own, nigga, and whatever happens to you is whatever happens to you. Just recognize this is Manosphere 2.0. You're on your own. It's not 3.0 compliant, right? You need a tetanus shot to go through the Manosphere with all that rust and
Oh
these
man, you need to get some vaccines taken.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
some places
wait, what?
No, I was just saying that some places, man, you need like a flu shot or something like that.
Man, some places you need to just have like a 360 surgical barrier placed around you, man, like a radiation suit.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's check out the chat here, man. I'm gonna scroll up a little bit. Let's see here. Okay, because a lot of it is the conversation, but I want to try to pick out some questions. Okay, Raining Woman asked, "This is part of the purpose of tonight's stream to establish a cultural intelligence for the current generation and abroad to separate those who choose not to financially and morally progress."
Where do you see that at? I don't see that.
No, I had to scroll up a bit. There's been I scrolled up because I didn't know, because there was a lot of conversation that was going on. It wasn't like questions, so I'm trying to pick out the questions in here, but I'm going to keep scrolling through. But she asked that one. Is part of the purpose of tonight's stream to establish a cultural intelligence for the current generation and abroad to separate from those who choose not to financially or morally progress. Mike, you go ahead and start on that one.
I honestly don't see that comment.
Okay.
I see it now. It's way up there. I didn't see that. Yes and no to Raining Woman's question. It says, is part of the purpose of tonight's stream to establish a cultural intelligence for the current generation and abroad to separate from those who choose not to financially and morally progress. Yes and no. So let me say the yes piece. Yes, it does do that. To your point, but no, we're not actually trying to do that. We're actually trying to set some base standards. I think what happens in black circles is that, or I should say, black circles, at least in the social media aspect, everyone's all over the place. I was listening to a hangout a few weeks ago, and I'm not going to mention the woman's name, but she basically said that everybody should be able to do whatever they want to do and still come together as a community. That completely defeats the whole entire purpose of a community to begin with, right? Communities have cultures have standards, or social standards or social norms that are congruent to the best interests of the community, which falls in line with cultural resilience. And when I hear people like that talk, men and women, especially women, it makes me think that they really don't have a full grasp on the bigger picture. This idea that you can just do whatever you want and then everybody just comes to the table at the end of the day and negotiates. What are you negotiating with? What leverage do you have if you haven't really followed any compliance?
Well, I was gonna say there's no sign of intelligence even in that. That doesn't really make much sense.
I know where she was going with this, but I think on a deeper level, what she was trying to say was that I should just be able to get whatever dude I want, and at the end of the day, we should still build a community. It's impossible to do that.
Yeah,
impossible. That is impossible.
Okay, smart woman plus smart man equals smart child. Okay, you alter that equation, you're gonna get questionable results. Let's start there. Right. So yeah, I mean, I'm just backing up your point to Raining Woman's question. Say yes and no, because it's not an intentional thing. Yes to that, but
right, it's not intentional. So
yeah, it's not intentional.
but you know, the byproduct of it is that you have some means. You know, I've had people come to our hangout and then go to another hangout and then say, I can't take what these other people are talking about, and then they come back to us and then they say, you know, I prefer this. One of the reasons why you have people who like the way we run the hangout, despite the fact that we only have 1,000 subscribers, they like the structure, right? We have a docket, we have items on the docket, we have a set amount of time that we spend on an item, and then we kind of just keep going on, right? It's not random and all over the place. And I think what happens a lot of times is that people want structure in life, or those who are looking for structure in life actually will go seek it out. And the same thing goes for women too, right? We have, like we said earlier, the term sapiosexual actually attracts women to the hangout, right? So women who find intelligence to be sexy or sexually attracted to intelligence into the opposite sex will seek out the Black Brain Trust, and they may not even say anything. They may just hang in the chat, or they may not. They may just view the hangout and may not even bother engaging. But they're seeking this out based on the structure and the quality of the intelligence. So,
Yeah, it's you know, it's an indicator. Intelligence takes one a long way if it's applied correctly in terms of your survival, and that's kind of been the underlying part of this discussion here is how, okay, from 2020 to 2050, where do we go, right?
mm-hmm.
So we're talking about uh, things that are to be learned and then applied in such a way to where it won't affect us going into this time period where there's going to be a vast technological push. So anyone who has insights as to one, you know what that means, and all of the things that are driving it. Not only that, but two, is actively engaged in a lot of it, right? So they can kind of speak from a position of having face to face interface with it, right? And even
Mm-hmm.
develop it, have something to do with its deployment. It really kind of speaks to actual experience, real life experience, which is real life data, and the ability to be able to act on it, utilizing intelligence. So, I mean, those are also indicators of one's ability to quote unquote be a provider, if you will. You know, one who's resourceful of mind and thought. So it's all apropos.
Mr. DE, how are you doing tonight?
Pretty good, Mike. Ulysses, how you doing? Complex?
I'm well, brother. How you doing, man?
Pretty good.
You have anything you want to add before we we're gonna go another 6 minutes and then we'll close out.
So, I just got in. I was just listening in for a little while. Sometimes we gotta have people who gonna. Right now, we're in the process of kind of negotiating a contract. A lot of people know where they're going. When I say a lot of people, we just need about 10% of our total population to be focused on the future
Mm-hmm.
in order to get out of the position that we're in. There's never been a time in history when you had um, everybody, not even 25% that built a great nation or make anything great. So that 10%, now the 10% got to negotiate with the rest, the other 90%, to see who among the other 90% we're going to choose the other 25% that is going to, the leaders are going to say, this is what we're going to do, this is what we want to do, and then we can give, then the leader is going to give to the other 25% the mandate, um, like whatever factories we need, you're going to build it. Whatever technology we need, you're going to find it. And this is what we are going to do to build for the future. And right now, I think we are in that negotiating period. And the problem is that you got the other, like 50% of the people, 55% of the people saying, no, we don't want to be in that. We want to be, um, we like the life that we're in, that we have. And we think that what you are trying to do is too hard for us to do. And beside the other people that we're looking at, the other people across the street, and they're not doing the same thing, so why should we do it? And that's the problem that we have. Our intelligence is like kind of lacking. And you have a lot of people who who though they want to move forward are still looking back. And it's only when you look back and you see the fire consuming the people that you're looking at, are you going to try to climb? I mean, you're going to move as fast as you can to get away from them because you don't want to get in. And that is the period that's coming. And a lot of people can't see that time, and some who see it don't want to accept that it's going to happen. They just want to hide, you know, head in the ground. So we've got a tough time, but in the future, a lot of people are going to make it easier for us. I don't know if you understand where I was going with that, but that's my opinion.
No, no, I completely understand that. Completely understand that. And you've been around quite a bit longer than most people on this panel and in the chat have. So you've seen, the analog era of society come all the way into the digital era, um, and make those strides or transition. So, but there was a time when black people coming out of slavery actually engaged in, um, building up their IQ, EQ, and CQ. Um, did you catch the beginning of the hangout, or or do you not know what's cultural intelligence? DE.
No, I didn't catch the beginning. I've been here for about half an hour.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to rehash it too much again because I know people in the chat have heard. But when you get a chance, listen to the beginning of the hangout. We kind of went over it in depth. So, but Complex, do you have any closing thoughts?
You know what, honestly, Mike, this is a really good discussion, man. We had, um, yeah, and I think that more discussions along these lines should kind of just serve as normal discussions that we have going forward in order to really establish a firm. I mean, I think even I think with the hangout we had 2 weeks ago, kind of discussing our 3.0 manifesto, if you will, and then kind of following up with this one. I think even more discussions that kind of fall in tow with this type of contextual discussion, then I think it'll only serve to kind of make our 3.0 compliance compliance rules and regulations more firm and established, because this is critical. There's a lot of critical thought put into it, and it's really supports a level of thinking that will actually produce successful people in the future. You can. There's many ways, and Dollar will even he'll attest to it. Even when the market is bad, somebody's making money.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So, um, having the intelligence to know what to do when the market is bad means you'll make money, right? Its intelligence is what will basically be the core basis on your not only your success but the success of like your heirs. Your the line that will then come after you. So you have to set that up now. We talk about generational wealth, but you know do we have the intelligence to actualize it? That's the question.
Mhm. Raina
Yeah,
in,
but
in the chat asks, go ahead, D. Your closing thoughts.
yeah, but um, what's our foundation? When you say community intelligence, what are basic foundation when it comes to community intelligence? Because you got to have a foundation to build on. And if your foundation is faulty, in the case of America, say America, America's foundation was faulty from the beginning because at one point, um, they're saying life, liberty, and ownership and ownership property, and they made property not the land that for everybody, but the land for some, and they built it on the idea that we are the last great nation that ever will be, and they knew from history that this was impossible. So they built a divided nation, thinking that it was perfect, or trying to say that they're trying to make a more perfect nation, even though they know they were building a divided nation. So are we gonna go along with that same uh, type of foundation, or we're going to say, look, hey, we know what reality is, and we're going to build with that in mind?
Mr. Paul Bryant, how goes it?
Good morning, gentlemen.
Sir
How's everybody?
Paul, going on, man?
Ulysses, my brother. How are you? DE,
We're
morning.
good.
Good morning, Paul.
How you guys up? I'm up early, about to go get some early morning cycling in, and I see that you guys are still on doing a chat.
Mhm.
Oh, I'm sorry, a hangout. Forgive me. I'm still half asleep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's Black Culture Intelligence Talk. So basically, developing strategic alliances and culture of resilience. Um, what it means to be cultural intelligent,
Hmm.
um, as well as the culture of building a culture of resilience. So working on what work for other groups as well as what can work for us, and the Manosphere 3.0 compliance piece of what are the components of that compliance piece, right?
Well, Mike. Excuse me. Mike. I always say that, in my opinion, there were two brilliant case studies that Black American people should absolutely sit down, take the time, dissect, and study: the Empire of Japan and the nation of Germany. Both nations were literally bombed to dust, and in less than 35 years, both nations emerged as top five economically powerful nations on earth. Um, Japan has slipped a bit, Germany hasn't. You know, I left behind binary thinking a long time ago. All right, binary thinking simply means that everything is either or, left, right, up, down. If you're for something, you're automatically against this. If you're against this, you're automatically against that. Because you are black, you have to think and do things a certain way in any and all situations. All mindsets which I continuously challenge. I've been of the mindset for a very long time that you have to think your way through. Take a different path: education, finance, business, capitalism. All right. It's all well and good to say there are these hurdles and these challenges and so on and so forth. Absolutely right. But now that you know that, you understand that, fine, move on, put that behind you and keep it moving. What are you doing besides constantly crying and complaining about that? I don't mean to dismiss anything that has happened in the past. I don't mean to just dismiss any current mindsets, but allow me to share something that I was told a long time ago. Um, Young man, you are in a system that is designed against you, set up to put roadblocks in your way, even to make you fail. Knowing that, plan and prepare and govern yourself accordingly. When you get your opportunity, you will maximize to the umpteenth degree and you will excel. Because at the end of the day, performance trumps everything else. And then roll from that. And everything is all about the mind. So I say all of this to say that myself personally, individuals who I deal with on a professional level are all of the mindset that okay, we're going to use the mind and take a different route. Produce business, education, finance. All right. Everyone will not own a business. We all know this. That is not the way forward for the masses. However, where you can, educate yourself, elevate your thinking, read more, change the way you think. Do not be afraid to take a different path and do things differently and take a different mindset and a different path forward than what you have been doing. Um, you make mention of strategic alliances, right? That nothing can happen or nothing will take place in the real world without the bottom line, that being money and infrastructure. The infrastructure has to be brain capital as well as financial capital. Without money, there is no power. Okay, you cannot take power unless you have guns or unless you have finances. So since you do not have guns, what you do have is educational capital, which you can then leverage to bring yourself financial capital. Then everything else and all the other high-minded ideals, you can then go forward. So that's something I embody. It's something that I live. You know, I've detailed to you guys mostly offline about the battles that I had and that I fought. All right. So at this point, I am more than willing to show anyone who is educationally minded and business minded. We can talk and discuss and show you how you can do things and what you should do. You know, without going on too much longer, or unless you guys want to throw a few ideas around. You know, strategic alliances have to be business alliances. All right. It's all fine well and good to talk, but what can you put on the table as far as finance and education and business?
Mike, we gonna have this conversation for on in the future, or
This is going to be an ongoing discussion throughout the rest of the year and for the foreseeable future. It's going to be happening at least twice a week.
all right? Because I'm there's some things that going through my mind that is kind of burning up, and
Yeah, yeah, write it down.
all right, let's do that.
Yeah, yeah. Paul, I just want to make a reference. I probably wouldn't compare African Americans to the Japanese and the Germans because they have their own nation state and they have their own um, they're not artificially developed like black people were in America. But I would refer back, like I was saying earlier in the hangout, that black people coming out of slavery, it only took them 30 years to start building their first Black Wall Street. So from 1865 all the way up to the 1890s, they were able to establish an economy, a working functioning economy that rivaled other nations.
Right, and that's what I was trying to get at. Granted, Black Americans do not and did not have their own nation to work with. Granted, so the focus was education finance. Exactly what you just said, coming out of slavery. To point specifically to 1865 and also 1968. All right. Just for a quick second, looking back to 1865, coming out of slavery, the powers that be, quote unquote, freed all the slaves. So now you tell these people, go forth and become a productive member of society. Yet you don't teach them, you don't show them, you don't instruct them on how to become productive members of society. Then you turn around and say, well, you know what? You are a vagrant. We're gonna put you behind bars.
Yep.
Flash forward to 1968, we have the Civil Rights Act. You tell Black Americans in 1968, go forward, be a productive member of society. You don't show them, teach them, instruct them how to actually be a productive member of society because they were not able to do so prior. Then, when they do not have the ability to do so, you turn around and then tell them that they're vagrants, and then you're going to put them behind bars. Okay, and what I realized and I saw during my time on Wall Street, it's not so much that you had a certain phenotype or a certain ethnicity who was better at any one thing than anyone else. But if you have, for argument's sake, 100 people and they're doing something and they have a history of doing something, and now you have two who do not have a history of doing so, how can you possibly expect them to produce on the same level as those who have been doing it? So, I get that, and I understand that is a huge, huge stumbling block and something that has not been addressed.
There's something else that Paul, I don't know if Paul didn't he left out of what he's saying is that from up to 1968, black community was was in the process of building out of their poverty, out of their being relegated to the bottom of society. They were building out of it. Between 1968 and today, it's been more of a destructive force than a building force, from what I can see. Yes, we have people going to college and getting degrees and going to work in a myriad of businesses throughout America, throughout the world. But we are not building that foundation that we had up to 1968.
Well, I'm not. I personally, while I personally stay away from that whole gender war nonsense, black men attacking women and women all that MGTOW, all that other. Listen, that argument is for other people. That's not my argument. That's not a rabbit hole that I am about to go down. I, with that perfunctory out of the way, I will say this: when you had the Great America program brought about by President Johnson, okay, that program basically went to the black family and said, listen, black woman, we will help you out, we will give you money, but there can't be a man in the home. So once you took that man out of that home, you destroyed that family unit. Okay, that had devastating effects. Now, I'm not pointing a finger at anyone. I'm highlighting that what you saw, to add on to what DE just said, once you destroyed that black family, that momentum that you saw many black Americans making collectively and individually came to a screeching halt. All right. So I'm not going to say that I feel we need, or well, we need, there needs to be a reintroduction of solid and stable families. But I will say this: you have to think your way through. Make your own choices, but understand history is your friend. You have to study the past. It helps you understand the past, it informs the present, and helps you to a large degree accurately predict the future. What has been done can be repeated again, but it starts with your mindset. Mindsets have to change. If mindsets do not change, there will be no progress. People can talk about it until the cows come home, but there has to be a mindset and mental change. At what point do you draw a line in the sand and say, I'm not accepting this anymore? At what point? So, as we're talking strategic alliances, all right, what doing things on a base level, that has to stop. Things have to change. Things cannot continue in their current state the way they are, and just thinking that, oh, because we're just going to think different, things are going to change. No, you have to actually do things differently.
All right,
Also,
with that,
really, I'm sorry, Mike. Yeah, I'm done. I'm done.
oh, go right ahead. Go right ahead. I'm going to wait for you to finish up so I can close out.
All right. Excuse me. For myself, again, I feel education, finance, and business. Capitalism is not an enemy. It's not a friend. It's merely a tool. Edu- Capitalism is no different than education. It's how you use it. And with that, I'll leave it at that.
All right, thanks for that. I know somebody's going to ask, what is this Manosphere 3.0 stuff? What are you guys talking about? And my response to that is, it's just like porn. You know it when you see it. So with that being said, thank you all for joining us. Hit the like button if you have not already. Share the video if possible, and we'll see you tomorrow in Space and Technology.
All right, peace, y'all.